Bait Box by Daniel Marc Chant. Narrated by Chris Barnes. Martin contemplated murder, as he had done so many times. Sitting at his desk, surrounded by people who, unlike him, felt their jobs mattered a damn, he closed his eyes and imagined himself in a nearby pub, toting a Kalashnikov AK-47 semi-automatic assault rifle. The place was a menagerie of squabbling couples, kids running wild, teenagers with acne and attitude in equal measure, traffic wardens, politicians, his ex-wife, his boss, his fellow workers, and whoever was stealing milk from his doorstep. All of them cunts. In his daydream, Martin took the stairs up to the second floor, where a giant anthropomorphic bear stood looking down at the drinkers below like a ridiculously benign god. Quite why Martin hated the bear so much he couldn't say. Perhaps it was something to do with the smug look on its face, or, and this was more likely he felt, it was down to the fact that on his 20th birthday, his parents had taken away his beloved teddy, named Harold, for reasons nobody understood, on the grounds that he was now too old for such things. "This town," he told the giant bear, "ain't big enough for the both of us." And with that, he gave the overgrown toy a mighty shove that sent it tumbling over the rail to the crowd below. It hit the floor below with a satisfying thud that caused every head within hearing distance to turn. Kids stopped screaming. Couples ceased their squabbling. Teenagers carried on being teenagers. A crowd gathered around the toppled teddy. When people had finished photographing the remnants of the bear, they took photographs of themselves and then each other, occasionally in groups or alone, throwing embarrassing signs and such like, the kind of things that sheltered privileged people tend to, all of them hastily typing and tagging each other, oblivious to the world around them. He hated that. Eventually, some of them thought to look up to determine the cause of the teddy bear's fall. Martin took the safety off his AK-47 and raised it for all to see. Somebody screamed. Somebody yelled, "He's got a gun!" But it was too late. With a joy that only the homicidal given the means to murder can ever know, Martin let loose his vengeance. The AK-47 cackled like a mad witch, spraying them all with neat packets of hot leaden death. Bullets ploughed into fleeing drinkers, ripping apart their internal organs, and filling the air with fountains of blood and flesh. It was glorious. "Martin, you got that report done for me yet?" Martin snarled inwardly. The pub with its pleasing carnage was gone from his mind, and he was back in the office, looking up at the scowling face of his boss. "Where's my report, Martin?" "Which one, Mr. Sanfelice? Are you trying to be funny?" Mr. Sanfelice scrunched up his face in a display of displeasure. "Which report do you think?" "The monthly accruals?" "Bingo. That's not due until Friday. I want it now. I want it now. I want it now. I want it now." How many times had Martin heard that from Sanfelice, and from his ex-wife, and his friends, and his family? Sometimes he went to bed with that damnable phrase stuck in his head, an ever-repeating earworm gnawing at his sanity. "I can't finish the report until the accounts department forwards me the latest figures, which they won't have until tomorrow. I want it now." "Impossible!" Martin slammed his fist on the desk. He was aware that all activity in the office had come to a sudden stop, and a dozen pairs of eyes were fixed on him. "It can't be done!" "Now, Martin!" And he got it. A right hook straight to his jaw. Mr. Sanfelice practically backflipped onto the nearest desk, scattering papers and scaring the living crap out of all nearby. Moments later, Martin had his hands around Mr. Sanfelice's throat and was vaguely aware of other hands trying to disengage him. As he did his best to throttle the life out of his boss, it occurred to him that he might be overdue for a holiday. Martin had never been to France before. In fact, The nearest he'd ever come to venturing abroad was a desperately dull weekend spent on the Isle of Wight. He had never been the most adventurous of men, and now he knew why. So far, nothing about his holiday had been relaxing. Perhaps if it hadn't begun with a desperate hunt for a passport he'd bought nearly 10 years ago and never used, he might have gotten into his taxi without wanting to spit blood. But even if he'd been totally chilled, the ride to the airport would still have raised his blood pressure to a life-threatening degree. Never in the field of human traffic, he told himself, had so many vehicles travelled so slowly for so many miles. It was as if every car owner in London was conspiring to ensure he got to the check-in with seconds to spare. And then there was the flight. Dear Lord, what was man thinking of when he invented the airplane? Which maniac thought it would be a great idea to pack hundreds of people into a metal tube and set it hurtling through the air at hundreds of miles an hour? By the time Martin had arrived at Orly Airport, he was on his 10th whiskey and 30th prayer. Somehow he had survived the flight, only to face the near certainty of a sudden and bloody death in the back of a taxi as it weaved through Paris with scant regard for the laws of either the road or physics. One day, he told himself, he would laugh about the nightmare coach trip from Paris to Mont-Saint-Clément, assuming, of course, he lived long enough to become that senile. And the hotel. Martin shook his head. Don't think about the hotel. Tomorrow morning, just check out and find yourself one that isn't doubling as a home for hyperactive children and drunken Londoners baffled by the inability of the natives to speak English. Here you are, sitting in a rowing boat on the Lac Saint-Clément, surrounded by beautiful mountains. The sky is blue. The birds are singing. And there's not another human being in sight. Martin opened his fishing basket and began assembling his fishing rod. As he fitted the aluminium poles together and clipped on the reel, everything was right with the world. He threaded his line, tied a hook and float to it, then delved into his plastic bait box. This is the life, he told himself, as he extracted a grub worm and impaled it on his hook. There are no bosses here, no parents, no ex-wife, no screaming kids, no moronic teenagers. A distant hum caused him to hesitate. What was it? Bees? Mosquitoes? Suddenly the hum was distant no more. It was loud, aggressive, and a definite irritation. As the speedboat flew past, it caused Martin's boat to rock alarmingly. Cursing, he held on to the sides and could only watch helplessly as his rod slipped into the water. The speedboat did an about-turn, creating a fresh set of waves that interacted with the first and caused utter chaos on the surface of the lake. Martin found himself being pitched first one way and then another until he could no longer hold on and was thrown forward. He landed on his stomach with his face rather closer to his bait box than he would have liked. Fearing for his life, he lay as still as he could, while the rocking subsided and the ugly cacophony of the speedboat receded into the distance. When all was still again, he sat up and retrieved his fishing rod from the water. The urge to pack up and go home gripped him like a fever, but he wasn't about to give in to it. He'd come here to relax and enjoy himself, and that's exactly what he was going to do. And no damn Frenchie with a speedboat was going to stop him. Martin cast his line, secured his rod, opened his copy of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, read 3 pages, and then fell asleep sitting up. He was woken by the boat rocking once more. This time, however, there was no speedboat. Indeed, the lake was as still as it ever had been, except for a frantic splashing off to starboard. "A catch!" Martin exclaimed gleefully, "and a bloody big one by the sound of things." He took up his fishing pole and was mightily pleased to feel it fighting him. Leaning back and bracing his feet against the front seat of the boat, he prepared to do battle. Whatever was in the end of his line wasn't giving up without a fight. Martin caught a glimpse of a large, scaly tail before it disappeared below the surface. He let the line play out to its full length before slowly reeling it in. Patience, he reminded himself, was the key. He had to take his time and allow the fish to tire itself out. If he hurried, the line would break, and he'd lose his catch forever. Martin was in his element. This was man against fish, and nothing else mattered. Time became meaningless as he skillfully pitted his wits and strength against his prey, until finally, after many hours, the fish gave up the fight. Feeling like the mightiest man on the planet, Martin reeled in his catch and leaned over to haul it aboard with his hands. A woman looked up at him. Martin froze as his brain tried to make sense of what he was seeing. A woman? At the end of his line? What did it mean? How was it possible? That's it, Martin muttered resignedly. It's finally happened. I've gone mad. He clung to the possibility that he'd inadvertently dredged up the victim of some tragic drowning, but that hope was cruelly dashed when the woman opened her eyes, flapped her tail and said, "You bastard!" And with that, the mermaid passed out. As Martin hauled the mermaid into his boat, he was surprised at how light she was. A fish of similar size, he reckoned, would be twice as heavy. It made her struggle seem even more epic. "So what have I got?" he asked himself, gently laying his catch on the floor of the boat. "And why didn't I bring a camera?" She was a little less than 5 feet tall. Her red locks flowed to her waist, that mystical borderland where women became fish. Martin would have said she was handsome rather than pretty. More Rita Hayworth than Ursula Andress. Her breasts were pert. "Oi!" The mermaid glared at Martin. "Get your eyes off my tits!" Martin felt his cheeks burn. He had been counting on the mermaid remaining unconscious until he'd had a chance to decide what to do with her. I'm sorry," he stammered, averting his eyes. "I wasn't staring, honest. Do you want to get this hook out of my mouth or what?" "Oh, fuck, yes." Feeling like the biggest shit on the planet, Martin reached for his penknife. "I'm afraid this might hurt a bit. Just do it." Martin had to sit astride the mermaid as he took his penknife to the hook in her mouth. He also had to place his face closer to hers than decency allowed. He noted with some relief that her breath was not the least bit fishy. In fact, it was positively fragrant. Deciding it was best not to prolong the mermaid's agony, he swiftly widened the wound made by the hook and then yanked it out. "There," he said, holding it up for the mermaid to see. "All done." The mermaid spat blood. "So, what do you want, the medal?" "I'm sorry. You can get off me any time you like." "Shit, sorry." Martin scrambled back into his seat. "Do you want me to throw you back in the water?" "You're such a gentleman." The mermaid propped herself up on her elbows. "I bet you're a real hit with the ladies." "I said I'm sorry." "Well, that's all right then. We can forget about you mutilating my mouth, scaring the crap out of me, making me struggle in pain for several hours, and then unceremoniously dragging me out of my natural habitat so you can cope with my cleavage." Martin felt a flash of annoyance. "I wasn't gulping." How many times had he told Francesca from accounts that very thing? Or any other number of women for that matter? Why could no one understand that when he was in deep in thought, he was totally unaware of what was in front of him? In a single moment, his guilt flipped to resentment. After all, it was hardly his fault he'd hooked a mermaid. The silly bitch should have been more careful. The mermaid surprised him with a smile. "Relax. I'm just rattling your cage. Do you really think you could have caught me if I hadn't wanted you to?" "What?" "Being a mermaid can get a bit boring. There's not a lot to do in this lake except swim with the fishes. There's no nightlife, no bars, not even a cinema. So now and then I liven things up by grabbing a mouthful of fishing hook and leading a human on a merry chase. Of course, I do it in the full expectation of being able to get away if the line doesn't break. The fisherman eventually gives up and cuts it. Sometimes they even throw away their rods. In all the hundreds of years I've been playing this game, no one has managed to land me until now." With genuine admiration in her eyes, the mermaid jabbed a finger in Martin's direction. "You, sir, are the finest fisherman I have ever met." A warm glow suffused Martin. It had been a long time since a woman had delivered him such a wholehearted compliment. "I expect you were just having an off day." I can't tell you how glad I am to have finally met my match. Frankly, I'm a little bit turned on." The mermaid ran her hands suggestively down the side of her body before allowing them to rest on her hips. "Tell me, do you find me attractive? Of course you do. I can see it in your eyes and the cute way you're dribbling out the side of your mouth." Martin wiped his chin. "How would we do it fishy style." "And that involves what exactly?" "You depositing your seed in the water and me swimming through it." "I see." Martin pictured the whole process in his mind and decided sex with mermaids wasn't all it was cracked up to be. On the other hand, any sex was better than no sex. He eyed the mermaid and decided everything about her was exquisite. If she had a human bottom half to match the top, she'd be a match for any of the supermodels and film stars he frequently fantasized about. He'd just about made up his mind to give in to his baser instincts when an unsettling thought occurred to him. What about contraception?" "Against my religion." "But if we had sex, you wouldn't get pregnant, would you?" "Are you kidding? Look at me. Am I not the very model of fertility? I have a whole belly full of eggs just waiting for you to be their daddy." "How many eggs are we talking about?" "Thousands. Don't worry, though. Only a handful ever reaches maturity, and I don't expect you to stick around to help raise them." Martin had a sudden vision of a family of fishmen, each a miniature version of himself from the waist upwards. "You know what?" he declared. "I'm not feeling that horny." "Then what would you like to do instead? It'll be a while before I've recovered enough to go back in the water, so you're stuck with me for now. You didn't by any chance bring a pack of cards with you?" "We could talk," said Martin. "You know, chat about this and that. It's a beautiful day, and you're a beautiful woman. I'd really appreciate your company. What's your name, by the way?" "Narrated. And yours?" "Martin." "Such a masculine name. It suits you." Martin realised he had finally reached the pinnacle of his life. Things would never be better than they were now. For the next couple of hours, he was in heaven as he told Nerida all his troubles, about how his ex-wife was draining him both financially and emotionally, how his family hated him, how his boss hated him even more, and on and on and on. Nerida hung on to his every word. She was the very model of sympathy and understanding. Every now and then she interrupted his flow to reassure him that none of it was his fault and to say things like, "You're a good man," and "People take advantage of you. They mistake your compassion for weakness." By the time his diatribe was drawing to a close, Martin felt like a lion. He'd suffered, by fuck he had, more than he deserved. But he had done it with dignity. He was no downtrodden victim. He was a martyr. He was Spartacus, Gandhi and Hercules rolled into one. If people hated him, it was because they were jealous, because he made them realise how base and worthless they were, because they could never be as good as him no matter how they tried. When he was done, a great calmness suffused him. He was blessed, truly blessed, and nothing could hurt him ever again. For a long, glorious moment he sat in silence, gazing at the exquisite creature lying before him. Then he lay beside her and kissed her tender lips. "Don't you want to make love?" she murmured. "No," he said, taking his penknife and driving it into her gullet. "That's not the way this story should end." Ever the fisherman, Martin set about gutting and filleting the greatest catch of his life. A half-hour later, he wrapped the last of Nerida's flesh in greaseproof paper and dumped her bones in the lake. "Perfect," he told himself, lying down in the boat and staring up at the cloudless sky. Everything is finally as it should be. Smiling serenely, he stared up at the stunning cobalt sky above him, toyfully playing with the bloodied penknife in his hands. For a while, he watched the blood from the end of the blade drip hypnotically over the sides of the boat before closing his eyes. He listened to the calming drip, drip, drip of blood as it hit the water. When I get back, I'll show them all how good a fisherman I am," he thought as he pocketed the blood-stained knife and continued to lay there, the soft sounds of nature acting as his lullaby.